Today, I'd like to explore energy transmission. And let me explain to you why I believe that this is such an important topic for us. Energy transmission is the way that we transmit energy into the field, into the energy field. And therefore, it's the way that we influence everybody and everything around us. We are energy beings. We're made out of energy. We're constantly receiving energy. If you like, the universe is transmitting energy to which we respond, and we're constantly releasing energy. But the other part of this is that we are constantly transmitting energy. We're kind of like a radio that receives signals but also transmits signals. And this transmission is important because of the influence that it has on people, but also on our physical environment. So I want to explain to you how this works, and I think it will become self-evident then why it's important and why it's valuable to pay attention to it in your own life. So we are energy transmitters. So what is that energy that we're transmitting? If you like, it's a signal that's formed of a lot of things that are going on inside us. So it's formed from our thoughts, it's formed also from our speech, it's formed from our feelings and our subtle senses, and it's also formed from our subconscious and our unconscious. So the signal that we share with the world, that you may find yourself very easily able to pick up in some people, is a mix of all of those things being kind of transmitted out. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about this, and you'll probably have noticed this with people, is that most people give off very mixed signals. For example, you can have somebody who says, yeah, I'm really, really happy today, but you can feel that underneath they're not. There's some big pressure they're wrestling with, or they're actually maybe not happy at all, but they're just putting on a front. So their words are saying the words of happy, but what's packaged inside those words is maybe unhappiness or maybe pressure or stress or something else. And you might experience that as they're hiding something. If you're very empathic, you might actually feel more of what they're feeling underneath than what their words are saying on the surface. Or if you are more tuned into the words, you may just feel like, oh, that's not very authentic. That doesn't feel very true to me. There's something a little bit off. If you look in public life, we see examples of this all the time. It's actually very rare to see people who really speak with a deep integration so that the transmission of energy that they're sharing with us feels not only authentic, but also truthful, like really true to them and to what they believe, and also to us. Because there's one thing, we talk a lot about authenticity these days. We can be true to ourselves and express our emotions and express ourselves very freely. That's a certain type of authenticity that doesn't necessarily even connect with the other person on the other side, because it's very much an expression of self. In my experience, there's a kind of energy transmission which comes from a deeper place inside ourselves where we're expressing the essence of ourselves that speaks also to the essence of life. So there's a deeper sense of truth in it than a purely personal authenticity. And this makes much more connection with other people, because other people are also looking for that. What's the essence of life? What's really true about life? What's true for you and true for me? Where can we come together around this notion of truth and of essence and of the true nature of who we are? So when I'm talking about energy transmission in a powerful way, I'm speaking more about that type of authenticity than the very personal, self-centered, self-expression type of authenticity that's become quite popular, especially in social media. So let's come back to this bag of signals that are all packaged together in your transmission. If you like, it's rather like, if you look at a heartbeat on a monitor, it consists of a whole lot of different signals. It's not just one, the same all the time, going up and down, up and down. You can see the up and the smaller ones and all the different frequencies together. So your transmission is a mixture of frequencies that are being emitted from you simultaneously and read or received by whoever's around you. So let's look at how these are made up. If you imagine that you're thinking about something, but emotionally you're feeling something rather different. For example, you're thinking about the future of your business. Emotionally, you're really worried about it. So in your thinking, you're trying to find a path forward. In your emotions, you're expressing doubt or fear or uncertainty. In your subtle energy, you might be sensing into something that could really work, something that is definitely subtle and intangible, perhaps difficult to put into words, but still shareable. It still comes through your transmission. And then in your subconscious or your unconscious, I'm not really going to explore unconscious today because we're not conscious of it, but in your subconscious there may be a whole lot of experiences that are playing into your emotions and that are holding you back from being able to go fully for whatever this future is that you're exploring. You then go and speak publicly about that. Perhaps you're doing a presentation about your business, or you're just talking to a friend about it, and they pick up all these different signals about it, and they can feel your worry or your concern. They can feel this subtle sense of something there. There's something there. They can feel your thoughts probing, like where, how, what can we do? They feel all of this together. And so they're getting a somewhat mixed signal, and they will find themselves responding in a rather mixed way because they don't know which signal really to go for. A very tangible example of this mixed signal type of energy transmission is often seen in parents. If a parent is very stressed, and then a child is doing things that the parent doesn't want them to do. So the parent's energy is all over the place, basically. They're worried, they're thinking about themselves probably, or whatever it is that's causing them stress. They're being bombarded by whatever the child is doing that they're not very happy about. So they've got a whole mixed bag of signals, and their energy is very disturbed. And then they say to the child, don't do that. And the child keeps on doing it because the child has no ability to pick up the signals in there because they're getting this very mixed bag of messaging, of energy. And so they don't know how to respond. They may respond to the worry and the negativity, and that confuses them. And so they just go on being agitated. The child is picking up your energy, and then they're so agitated that they just continue messing around or annoying you or whatever it's doing. Or the child might respond out of fear. Like if you are very, very strict, very hard in that moment, because you're very stressed, the child may respond out of fear, out of their own unconscious and subconscious, probably some experiences in the past where perhaps you were very angry or it was a very unpleasant experience for the child to keep doing what they were doing that was annoying you. And so they freeze in fear. Now, this is of course not how we want to be parenting or being with children. So let's describe an alternative scenario. And you can translate this into any area of life. It's equally applicable in any aspect of family relationships, especially primary relationships. It's very applicable in business and communities and projects. So anywhere where we are socializing and operating together, the same principles are playing out. So let's look at a time when you're really relaxed, you're happy, you're doing whatever you're doing. The child does something that concerns you. Maybe they're near the electric power point or something and you don't want them to play with it. And you say, maybe you offer them a toy to play with, or you distract them, or you have the time to sit down and explain to them why they shouldn't play with the power point. And there is a smooth, harmonious transmission of the energy that you are sharing, and the child can then hear your signal. And if you're really able to do what I described, maybe they get curious. It's like, oh, okay, they're interested. They ask you more questions about electricity and why it's dangerous and what it's doing and all of these kinds of things. Or they take the distraction, they take the toy and go off in another direction, and then you're not worried about them anymore. So our ability to respond to another person's energy is very much predicated on the signal that they're transmitting. If they transmit a clear signal, it's easy for you to pick up that signal and respond to it directly. If they transmit a very mixed signal, then you're wondering what's going on, what to respond to. If you're empathic, you probably respond more strongly to how they're feeling. But then the words feel very untrue and you don't know what to do with that. Like, it's very difficult for the mind to know what to do when the word part, the mind part, is contradicted by the feeling part. If you can feel the subtle energy part at the same time, then you're getting even more signals. And what do you respond to? If you're very intuitive, you might pick up the subtle signal. The empath part of you is responding to how they're feeling. The mind is responding to their words, how it's all packaged together. And then you are now experiencing that same energy as they are. And then your energy starts to feel somewhat invaded because you have lost your ability to discern how you think or how you choose to respond to this other person. So let's explore what it looks like when the energy is very aligned and then the signal is very clear. Imagine, if you can, that what you're feeling inside you and then what you're speaking, what you're tapping into at a subtle level, all of those are really aligned. And then your action in the world also aligns with what you speak about, the promises and the commitments you make, the decisions you make, and all the other behaviors, the habits and the actions you do on a daily basis. So we would experience you then as a very aligned or coherent person. When you say something, we would be likely to trust that you're going to do what you say, because when you make a promise or you make a commitment, there's coherence in your energy and your action is able to follow through. You've already sensed the subtle information that is relevant to this commitment or this decision. Your feelings are aligned because you're confident about what you're doing. You've worked through any difficult emotions around it. You're not being dominated by your subconscious or your unconscious, past unexamined material, past experiences that might make you feel nervous or afraid or not able to fulfill on your promise. So now we're looking at a person who is very aligned, very coherent, and has a powerful transmission of energy. And this is powerful in a true way. So when I say in a true way, it means that not only are you aligned from the inside to the outside of yourself, but you are also aligned with fundamental human values. So for example, there is coherence in your emotions. You're relaxed, you're happy. When you speak, people experience their own responses. They're not experiencing you because your energy has its own containment, it has its own boundary. You're simply sharing something through speaking because your energy is aligned, people can receive it easily. They can then respond from their own space, not either invaded by you or trying to kind of get inside to feel what you're feeling, because your feelings and your words and your subtle energy are all aligned with each other. And that is a very coherent transmission. That also sets a very high bar. Even as I listen to myself speaking, it comes to mind times when I've made commitments and then not kept them. It brings to mind times when maybe I've changed my mind or I've been very flexible and very spontaneous and let people down. So I could literally feel that as I was speaking about it. What a high bar we set for ourselves when we intend to be that type of person who has that kind of powerful energy transmission that attracts people to work with us and to collaborate with us, because it's very comfortable for their energy too. And it also raises us to a standard. Like that kind of transmission creates a field around us where other people also stand up. They also want to rise to that kind of standard rather than fall to a kind of, oh, well, I'll just do whatever the default is. I'll do whatever I feel like doing. It's an expansive and uplifting energy that I'm speaking of. And I think it's something that we can always become better at. It's not the kind of thing you become perfect at. It's an aspirational energy and an inspirational energy, and it's something that we can work on through our human life. Let's take another example that's a little bit different from what I spoke about before, but very common in business and in politics, which is where there's very strong alignment and there actually can be strong transmission, but it's of an energy that is not aligned with human values. So we see this in politicians, for example, or leaders who are very controlling. We also see this in partners who are very controlling, where there is a lot of coherence in what they say, in the sense that they have a lot of self-control, they have a lot of self-confidence, they really believe in what they're saying, but it doesn't align with our fundamental beliefs. That level of control doesn't align with the innate human longing for freedom and joy. That level of how do I say it? Like command, if you like. Commanding leadership, where people follow not because they're inspired, but because their energy is actually being controlled by that person. So they become compliant with that person, maybe through fear or maybe because of subconscious and unconscious material that just makes them naturally follow somebody who is or appears to be more powerful than them. So that is not how we want to be governed or led. That's not how we want to be as human beings. That kind of compliance fundamentally comes from fear inside us. Like we do it because we're afraid of the consequences rather than doing it because we aspire to become a better person. This is a very important topic. You can see now why energy transmission is so important in today's world, because there are many people in leadership positions who have that kind of transmission where it's almost like they can mesmerize you. We call them sometimes mind magicians. There's actually a special ability which some human beings, some people have very strongly, where they can kind of mesmerize an audience to do what they want. But it's not with the will of that audience. It's based on their will at the expense of your will. I personally believe that it's really important that we have the kind of energy transmission that is aligned all the way through to our deepest values and calls other people into their values, not only mine, but theirs. And then we can look at where we have shared values and where we want to cooperate or collaborate or live in community, or whatever it is that's important for us. Now let's take another example of energy transmission where a person feels very disempowered. Maybe they're depressed, or they feel a lot of grief and sadness about life, or they feel disempowered by those very power systems that I'm talking about that are manipulative and controlling. And they've gone into, so this person's gone into a victim state. They blame those controlling governance models, leadership structures, individual people. They're very angry at them maybe, or they're depressed, like, well, there's no hope for us, there's nothing we can do, this is the way the world is, you can't change it, it's always been like that and it's always going to be like that. There's a kind of hopelessness and sometimes despair in this kind of position. Let's look at the transmission that a person has there. So in this situation, they're not even trying to say nice words. They say very negative words, actually sometimes more negative than is actually true. So there's a very disconcerting transmission here, because you can feel the pain of the person, especially if you're empathic. And you know that that pain is real. You don't want to dismiss the pain. But you can hear people say things like, it's hopeless. There's no hope for us. That, we are just living in a control system. We're living in an illusion. I hear these kinds of things all the time, and there's nothing we can do about it. And there's something in the human spirit that says, hold on a moment, that's not true. There's always something we can do about it. So their words are not even trying to be true. If anything, they're deliberately untrue. And then that's packed with the energy of hopelessness and despair. There's usually quite a lot of hidden anger in there as well. Their actions are then usually non-actions, not doing things, or even sabotaging themselves and potentially other people. So they try to pull you down when you're inspired, and they say, that's never going to work. Forget it. You can't do that. You're not powerful enough to do that. Who are you to do that? So their thoughts and often even their words will actually literally pull other people down. Now there's a strength in this transmission because it's quite aligned, rather than like the controlling manipulative person who's got very aligned energy, except it doesn't align with human values. This again is another version. This is the flip side, if you like. This is the victim of that perpetrator. The person, this person's energy pulls you down. So it's aligned, you can get sucked into it very easily, but it's not aligned with our fundamental human values again, because it doesn't speak of love and truth and joy and peace and freedom. These are the things that unite us as human beings. It speaks of hopelessness and despair and joylessness and being trapped. Is the very opposite of our fundamental values. So how do we cultivate the kind of transmission that uplifts us and expands our energy and our consciousness and uplifts other people around us in a genuine way that is empowering to everybody? This, I think, is really one of those things that you explore over a lifetime. But if you understand how that transmission is made up, then most definitely you can work on it and make a lot of change in a very short time. I actually remember teaching a course about transmission, and there's one person in particular who somehow really got it through some very simple exercises we did, where people were speaking with each other and listening to and commenting on each other's transmission. And she found this place inside herself where she can transmit very powerful, truthful energy. And the minute she does that, you immediately listen. It's like you have to listen because you know she's telling the truth. When she slips into her ordinary everyday energy, which has, let's say, a certain amount of that unconscious and subconscious material in it, old stuff around parents and, feeling small, just like many of us do, her speech is not nearly as clear, and it's very difficult sometimes to understand what she's saying. So the contrast is very strong. Now, this is somebody where her first language is not English, and so it's particularly fascinating, because when she transmits clearly, her English is also much better. And when she doesn't speak with that transmission, just in her ordinary default speech, even her English is not as easy to understand. So this is a particularly clear example of how transmission works. In fact, what I've experienced is when the transmission is strong and aligned with truth, aligned with our fundamental values, there is a flow in our speech, a flow in our words that is not only transmitting energy, but it's like we receive the right words to speak as we speak. And so there is a flow between me, the person who's speaking and transmitting the energy, and the energy field, the universal field. It's very beautiful to experience. And so how I experience that is that I am both receiving energy. In a way, I receive the words, at one level from the universe. At another level, I would say the words are rising up from the deepest place inside me. And I'm transmitting those words at the same time. And I'm experiencing the meaning of the words all the way through my system. And that's when the transmission is the most powerful. So right now, I can feel my whole body is not quite vibrating, but resonating with the words that I'm speaking, because there's no part of me that is thinking or feeling something else. I'm completely aligned with the words that I'm speaking as they come to my voice from this universal field and this inner depths of my own individual being, both meeting right here where I'm speaking. And then my whole body resonates with that because it feels true, it feels right. I know that I'm talking about something powerful and truthful and valuable for people who are listening. My feelings are completely aligned, my emotions, because I'm interested in what I'm speaking about. I'm enthusiastic about sharing it with you. I have nothing that says, oh, Sarah, you don't really know what you're talking about. You read about this in a book, but you don't really know how to do it. It's like, I know how to do this. I've been learning and practicing energy transmission for years, and so I'm confident in what I'm sharing, and therefore I don't need to have any emotions of doubt or confusion. And at the same time, I can acknowledge that I'm going to get better at transmission. I mentioned a little while ago that as I was speaking, I could sense that this underlying energy of some promises and commitments I've made that I haven't lived up to, I didn't feel disturbed by those because I understand that I'm human and I'm on the journey of growing and I'm getting better at keeping commitments and making promises I can keep rather than the wild, enthusiastic promises I used to make, which I had no chance of being able to keep just because I was that kind of person. So I could be aware of that, but without getting into any kind of emotion like blame or victim or, oh, I'm so bad, because I understand that that's part of the human journey. But right now, when I'm speaking about energy transmission itself and how we do it, I don't have any of those kind of underlying thoughts that are pulling me away from the topic in any way at all, or that I even need to feel neutral about, because it's like I'm just all in on what I'm speaking. And usually people can feel that in their own energy, especially people who are highly sensitive, highly intuitive, highly empathic. You can feel when the transmission is aligned and when the person is fully present in what they're speaking about and they're not distracted by anything else. And let me do a little demonstration. If I continue talking, but I'm now looking just outside my window, I'm looking at the trees and the water out there, and I can feel immediately how it's like there's a whole part of my body that starts to respond differently because it's now responding to the trees and the water. And the concentration of my energy around a single topic, it's now coming back. Now I can feel my whole body beginning to resonate with what I'm speaking about. If I go out and look, now I'm looking at the sky and I'm looking at my office, I can feel immediately the potency goes out simply because my attention is in two different places at the same time. And you probably know what that feels like. You're in a conversation with somebody and there's something going on behind them and you keep looking at it. Or, they've got something on their face. Sometimes we get drawn to something we're looking at. Now, what's going on with your eye at the moment? And we're distracted, slightly distracted from being fully present with what that person is communicating with us in that moment. There's not something wrong with it, but it changes your transmission. That's really what I want to demonstrate. And I don't know if I'm going to try to do a different demonstration. So we're speaking here about transmission, and I'm going to see what happens if I start thinking about something that's been very sad in my life and see what happens to the transmission here. I don't know if I can do this. It's a little bit more challenging, but I can think of an example actually. Like I'm going to describe this because I don't think I can demonstrate it, but I've had some real challenges in business at times. And when I've had those kinds of challenges where everything feels very wobbly and the business doesn't feel sure. When I go out and do sales, I can literally feel it. It's like I don't have that conviction all the way through my body, my energy field, every part of me to speak into the sale. When I'm relaxed and happy and very confident about the future of the business, and I feel, it's like I need to feel in charge, not in charge like I'm in charge of everybody, in charge of myself, in charge of my own energy, so that I can go forward with just knowing that I'm going to find a way. Then my energy is all in to whatever I'm speaking about. And it's a very different experience, and the results are very different. So this is why energy transmission is important, because the results are different. Business results, relationship results, whatever you want to happen in your life is more likely to happen when your energy is more aligned and helps others' energy to be aligned around you. So let's come back to the topic of how do we cultivate energy transmission. So one of the biggest things that can confuse your transmission is whatever's going on with you emotionally. And your emotions are often a whole mix of responses to things that are going on in your life. So the first thing to understand about your emotions is that they are always a response to something. They're not on the leading edge of your life. They're not in the territory where you go out and sense into the subtle energy field, which I've spoken about in other Beyond Intelligence podcasts, where our subtle energy goes reaching out into the field to find information. Our emotions, emotionally, we might respond to that information. For example, if you reach out into the subtle field and you feel like, oh, what I'm doing is not going to get work. It's not going to work. It's actually not really good. Or perhaps you're at the beginning of a new relationship and you get this subtle feeling like, oh my goodness, this isn't good for me. And you want to go into denial of it. So emotionally, you might respond to that. And you might respond by shutting it down. You might respond by feeling really sad and tragic. You might respond by feeling disappointed. Do you see, like, you've got this information and now you're responding to it. And how you respond to it is very different if you shut down, for example, or you get upset or you get angry. Really different emotional content there. So if we want to transmit powerful energy, we do need to have a good degree of self-mastery, mastery of our emotions. You can't just transmit energy and in a consistent way over time without that mastery. I have seen people who didn't have emotional mastery be able to transmit very powerful energy, especially after a very powerful life result. Especially I've seen it in the context of healing. So where somebody's experienced really powerful healing, especially where there's powerful energy involved with it, and then they speak about that healing, and they're speaking with this very powerful energy and powerful experience, their transmission can be extraordinary. When we speak about beautiful results we've experienced and we're completely in alignment with it, especially when it's very fresh, then the transmission can be powerful. And I would imagine you get that at times in things like Alcoholics Anonymous groups. I've heard people talk about that, where somebody's speaking really authentically about their experience, and their experience was a very positive experience for them, very healing experience. Then there is a kind of natural transmission that happens during that time. The problem is most people can't maintain that very well. So what I'm really wanting to talk about is how do we build this transmission so that we're able to call on it whenever we want it and more live into it, so it's the way we communicate all the time. So emotional self-mastery is really important. What that means more than anything, well, actually, that means two things. One is it's how do we respond, as I showed you, to whatever's happening in our life. That's, at some level, maybe the easier part. So maybe there's something going wrong, but you can neutralize it instead of going into drama and victimhood and getting very upset about it. You can say, okay, this is what's happening. I'm going to see how I want to respond, or I'm going to see what's actually going on here, or I'm going to explore some options for dealing with it. It's a very different response from, oh my God, this is the end of the world type of emotion. So we can learn, we can get better at managing our responses, but they tend to get undone by the emotional content, or the emotional content from our past. So stuff that's especially in our subconscious and our unconscious. So this is the material where we've experienced things when we were younger, and also in past lives, I would say, from my experience, that we haven't found a way to deal with. And so we have just buried away our anger, our disappointment, our sadness, our grief, our fear, all these emotional responses we had at the time, and we've never really faced them again. Now, this is important because something might happen in your life now that triggers some of that hidden, buried material. You have no idea why it is that when your husband says something to you that's not really harmful, you completely freak out. It just doesn't make any sense, but you are so triggered by what they've said or what they've done, you lose control of yourself. That's where you know that the stuff is coming up from the past, this life and past lifetimes, that hasn't yet been resolved. You haven't gone in and looked at it and made peace with it in some way. Now, there are many different ways of doing this kind of work. We can talk about facing our shadow, facing our own darkness. This is usually the stuff that we have buried, deeply, deeply suppressed. So much so that often we have no awareness that it exists until somebody triggers you. I teach some specific methods for dealing with this around opening your heart, a way to open up the defenses of your heart, the places where you've shut down, where you've been hurt, especially in this lifetime. I also teach a karma release process for where you have had situations in past lives that are unresolved, and then they're playing out in this present life. And I also teach very deep ways of being able to be present with what you're feeling, and even give space to that darkness inside you, that stuff that you don't want to look at because you're afraid of, because it doesn't feel all sparkly and light and beautiful in your view. Because it is doing these kinds of practices that enable us to not be run by our subconscious and our unconscious, which is our past, which is all our old energy. It doesn't have validity in terms of truthfulness now. It was relevant in the past, it's not relevant now. And we don't want that energy to be running us. We want to be in the present and receiving the energy that is our future. It contains our future, not the other way around. But so many people are pretty much run by their past scripts, their past narratives, their past experiences, especially the ones that are hidden so deeply that they don't even know what they are anymore. So this takes courage to face that shadow, face your own darkness, face the parts of yourself that you don't like. Come to love the parts of yourself that you don't love. Come to love the parts of yourself even that you hate, which is a very challenging thing to do, but it is a necessary thing to do. That is a real challenge. But if you want to have powerful energy transmission, then you need to be able to master yourself increasingly. This is a journey and it takes time, possibly decades. So you need to be very, very patient with it. But all the time that you're doing that, you'll find yourself transmitting energy more powerfully. But it's not only about dealing with the old stuff and the dark stuff inside us. We also need to learn how to speak more truthfully. How do we tap into, I'm going to say, the deeper and the higher truth in order to be able to communicate with truth, with essence, from the essence of life itself and from the essence of ourself, so that people feel the resonance of the truth you're speaking. It's not just about having neutralized or made peace with your past. It's what are you tapping into? What are you sharing with people that makes them feel like, yes, that's me, that's life, that's the kind of life that I want to be living. Because this is where the real power is of leadership within a relationship, with your children, within your business, within your community, whatever it is, wherever your leadership lies, and we all lead in some part of our life. This is where the power comes in. So this is very important. One of the things that I had to do, and I still do quite a lot, is learn how to listen for what's truthful, for what's true. I listen very, very carefully to what other people say, and I listen very carefully to what I am saying, and I ask myself, is that really true? And I actually have spent a lot of time correcting myself when I say things that actually don't feel true to me. They don't resonate with truth. And I feel that all the way through my body. And more than my body, through my energy field. When I say something, it's like, oh, that's a bit off actually. I can feel it in my field. I can feel it with my subtle senses. It's like, oh, I don't like that. That doesn't feel right. And I will often correct what I've just said. I'll say, no, that wasn't quite right. And for a while, I was quite strong about this, probably quite annoying to other people, because it was so important for me to be able to listen to myself and feel what's true, and then feel what's not true, and speak as truthfully as I can. And I can be quite annoying as well, because when other people speak, I can now hear very easily when they're saying things that are not true. So I hear the drama queens amongst us say, oh my God, this is awful, nothing's ever going to work again. It's like, that's not true. Some parts of your life are going to work again. I know you're feeling that, but it's just simply not true. And let's not say it, because your words have power. When you transmit the energy of those words out into the universe, they have power to change your life. And you don't want to be manifesting or transmitting the power of things that you don't want to happen. So you don't want it to be true that my life's never going to work again, because that would be a miserable life, and that's not what you're calling in at the moment. So our words have power to shape the universe, and I will talk about that more in another episode. But that's why this matters so much, because that drama queen position, for example, is actually a disastrous position in terms of the transmission you have and the effect that it has in terms of your manifestation power, because you manifest things you don't want. I also hear very easily nowadays, after spending many, many years listening to people talking about what they do want, I can hear when it's likely to happen because there's truth in it, and when it's not aligned with their inner energy. So if you say something like, oh, well, I want to live in this gorgeous house right on the ocean and the sea's sparkling, and I'm living this free life with complete financial freedom, even as I say it, you can probably hear that there's very little truth in that. It's not resonating with the inside of me. It's not resonating with where my energy is at the moment. That doesn't mean my energy needs to be at the level of where I'm going. I can speak about something I want in the future now and have full resonance in it, and there I have full manifestation power. But if I speak with this kind of like, yeah, I want that, it's a romantic dream, but inside myself, I'm not willing to go and make the kind of business or make the kind of money or get the kind of relationship or whatever it is that's going to get me that mansion on the ocean with the sparkling blah, 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 and the financial freedom. Like, I don't have what it takes to engage with money and the power I need to be able to manifest that. Then you can feel that inside somebody. So this is where the learning comes in. We need to build our power of transmission by seeing the consequences of our transmission. We transmit some energy into the world. We speak something, or we just resonate it into the world from our being, even without speaking. But very often our mind is speaking anyway. So the speech, I think, is an important part of it. And we see the consequences in the real world. We see people's eyes open in curiosity or shut down in confusion. We see results happening or not happening based on what we have said out loud that we want. so our manifestation. And from the feedback we get, we start to be able to refine our transmission and get better and better at it. So I've noticed that the more truthful I am, truthful to life, the kind of collective truth, which is often speaking from love, speaking as truthfully as I can, as honestly as I can, speaking with peace in my heart and in my being, speaking from a place where there is kind of a light joy bubbling inside me. It's not very tangible, but it's there. Speaking into the truth of being human, the sovereignty, the freedom, the real power of being human. So when I speak that way, and I'm experiencing it emotionally, so emotionally I'm able to align with what I'm speaking. I'm able to feel, I'm able to respond to what I'm speaking by feeling it in that moment. So my emotions are aligned with what my subtle energy is tuning into. And then I have enough mastery of my past and my deep hidden past that it's not interfering in any way at the moment, which is not to say it's complete mastery. It will interfere with something in the future again, and there will be more work for me to do, I'm sure. But right now it's quiet, there's peace in there, and so my depths, the depths of my being, are aligned with what I'm speaking, because in the depths is the truth of me as an individual. And then in the universe, in the expansion of the universe, is the truth of life. And they meet inside me as an element of life, as a part of life. When I feel that coming together of truth from the depths of me to the expansion of life and the universe, and I speak that, and my emotions are able to respond in alignment, and so I feel it. And my body resonates all the way through, so I'm living it right now. What I'm speaking, I'm living, I'm experiencing. That is when you get transmission. That is completely different from speaking about what I read in a book last week, or what I've heard spiritual teachers speak about, but I haven't experienced for myself yet. So if you get interested in transmission, which for me is a tool of power and leadership, truthful power, not power that belongs to me, but participating in the power of life. If that's something that you are interested in and feels important to you, then it's really, really important to practice these skills so that your transmission aligns with your speech. And then you become a person who uplifts and expands people's consciousness. And when their consciousness expands, they make better decisions, they make wiser decisions. And so you have a benign effect on the people around you. And actually, very powerfully, you're transmitting that energy out into the field. And there are no gaps in the field, there's no gaps in the energy. So your transmission is actually touching the whole universe. And sometimes you can feel that. It's like, oh, I feel connected as I speak. I feel connected with everything, and I feel connected with myself as an individual in that everything. And then it's almost as if life itself, or perhaps it's not as if, then life is responding as well. It's vibrating or it's resonating with you. And so there is an enhanced power of transmission that comes through at the same time. Life, it appears, loves to be spoken about, and especially loves to be spoken about in a way that is very aligned with what life really is. When we tell the truth about life, what we experience is this enhanced power of speech. There's an enhancement of the energy, and you feel like, oh, what I'm saying is really true. And in recognizing that, it feels even more true. So this kind of expanding circles of truth that emanate around you, that is the transmission itself, which is a very deeply different experience from when you are not speaking truth, or you're just talking about some very random subject. If you're just talking about something like, the price of pineapples today or whatever, yes, that's true at a very physical level. It doesn't have enormous significance for anything. So I'm really talking about the transmission of when you're speaking about things that are important to you and important to other people, because this is where we want our transmission to be powerful. And that's really in any relationship. I would say that the more I find that I come into myself and speak from the depths of myself in connection with the expansion of the universe, the more people come away saying, oh my goodness, that was an amazing conversation. I loved today. And there's a challenge in that, because it's so normal for us to talk about the price of pineapples or whatever's been happening, or, you know, do you remember that story? Do you remember that story? All stuff in the past. It's entertaining and there's nothing wrong with it. But I personally don't come away from those conversations feeling anything particularly valuable has happened. Whereas if we have a conversation that really connects us through our desire as human beings for freedom and joy and peace and these things that are deeply meaningful for us, we have very meaningful conversations and we connect with each other in a way that makes us feel deeply fulfilled. And to me, a social relationship that brings fulfillment is far more rewarding than a social relationship that passes time talking about the past. So I'm going to conclude this conversation about energy transmission here. I hope that by now it's become very apparent how important this is, how valuable this is, and especially how significant it is in today's world. I was going to say I'm sure, and as I said it, I could feel the transmission wasn't quite right, which is why I hesitated. I know that as more of us master energy transmission, we become able to shift the frequency of the planet, because we influence other people as well, for the better. This is a powerful tool in our ability to influence consciousness on this planet in a way that is aligned with life, that is aligned with the true power of life, and that enhances the sovereignty. It speaks to the sovereignty and the freedom, the innate freedom of life as it's expressed through every individual human being.